Colin Moriarty is, full disclosure, one of my favorite podcasters of all time. I absolutely love his content. I think he is a great, I love him when he used to write articles. He used to work at IGN. So I've followed him since he worked at IGN. He formed Kind of Funny. He left there, formed his own show, Sacred Symbols, which is a weekly PlayStation podcast.
So real quick, just for even more context for me, did he leave Kind of Funny, or was he let go of Kind of Funny, or is it a little bit more like either or?
So he made a joke on International Women's Day on Twitter. And it said something, it was like, he said he was literally in bed with his girlfriend at the time he made it. He goes, I didn't think it would be an issue. It said, I don't know, remember it was hashtag a day without a woman? That thing was trending for a while. So he put, finally some peace and quiet, hashtag a day without a woman, which is a dumb, lame joke, you know? And he woke up the next day to Twitter and everyone freaking out. And the company he had formed were like, Greg Miller and I cannot remember the other two guys,
Scarpino,
Nick and Tim Geddes.
Yeah.
So Tim Geddes and Nick Scarpino seemed to set out of it. Tim Geddes and Greg Miller, who Greg Miller was his roommate at the time, best friend, came out and was like, we're disgusted by his behavior and this, and this. And he just, like, the dogpiling from games media just jumped on him over this joke. You know, and he's been fairly center right for a while, you know, like I think it was more that was an excuse to attack him for everything. And so he sold his shares in Kind of Funny. He was like, fuck this. Okay. You guys do with it what you want. You know, I'm out. He was like, I don't want to put motive into him. It appeared like he felt a little burned, you know, and it was like, these dudes were supposed to be my brothers and they threw me under the bus. Fuck them. That's the impression I got.
Sure.
He then went on, you know, Dave Rubin, he's been on Joe Rogan's podcast because of this incident. Started his own thing where he just did history videos, which were fascinating. He got out of that to get back into the PlayStation podcasts, because he had the #1 PlayStation podcast and Podcast Beyond. Now, again, him and Chris Ray-Gun. Chris Ray-Gun he's actually left. I would say he's left of where you are. But he does pretty kind of like anti-SJW videos, outrage culture, makes fun of a lot of parody videos. So they started a PlayStation podcast, #1 PlayStation podcast in the world. More people listen to this PlayStation podcast than anyone else.
And it's called Sacred Symbols?
Sacred Symbols.
Okay.
I listen to it every week. I think it's great. It literally is talking about PlayStation news. That's it. Nothing controversial. It's just PlayStation news. If politics comes up, because like something politically related happened in gaming, they will talk about it, but it's very center of the aisle. They were invited to PAX West.
They were invited or they submitted for a panel?
I don't remember which one it was.
Okay, I don't know either. I just wanted clarification.
Yeah, I don't actually. That's a good clarification because I'm not quite sure. And they were going to be in this they put them in the big hall that was going to be live Twitch streaming it on top of it. You know, so they put them in like one of their main event halls. Not like a little side one. Mm-hmm. And they said, they got the letter, said, hey, please announce this to your thing, start selling tickets, all this. So they announce it. People are booking flights from their fan base, everything. And then one day they wake up and they're like, yeah, you're no longer doing it. They get an email. And Colin's like, okay, what happened? And they just were like, we're not going to give you a reason, but you're no longer welcome to. I would assume because, and this is again assuming, and because no one's released the official statement, he's tried to get that. It's because Colin, I'm assuming there is a very vocal minority that freaked out about this because people for whatever reason in games hate him. Like you would think this guy is alt-right by the way they talk, like he is. They hate him. He gets death threats constantly. If you just Google @no taxation and see what people are saying on Twitter, people are saying they're going to kill him like every day. It's ridiculous. And to me, I'm assuming it was a small minority of people who were complaining, probably calling him a Nazi, which he's been unjustifiably called numerous times. And I feel like PAX, either from a business standpoint was like, well, it's not worth the bad press, or because PAX tends to be a little more progressive, Seattle-based, PAX West does, progressive-based. you know, took it upon themselves. But we have to kind of fill in the blanks because PAX will not release a statement. And that's kind of caught up to speed.
Yeah, that's because they don't confirm why. All we can do is speculate, right?
Yeah.
And the thing is, objectively, if there was a legitimate reason that they could cite for why they chose to not put them there, they would release it. If it were a scheduling conflict, they would release it. If there were some legal reasons, hey, we just now found out 5 years ago that you were involved in this thing, then
Even
they
if it was
would
like
have released
a clip of something he said. Hey, you said this. We think this is offensive. They would have released it.
I feel, though, that if that were the case, they would have to play it closer to the vest and not say anything, because we're talking almost discrimination at this point, and that's not good for any brand to say, yeah, it's your ideology, it's your beliefs, and that's why you're not allowed to perform here, or to have a panel here. We talk a lot about the concept of free speech and freedom of expression and all of those kind of things, and we also have both, obviously put the exception there that, like, when it comes to corporate entities, when it comes to businesses and things like that freedom of speech doesn't necessarily mean the same thing. It's like, we do have the freedom of speech, but if businesses want to prevent you from being a part of their show, they can do that for next to any reason. However, the optics of them canceling him because of they feel that his beliefs are problematic, that's discrimination, and that's going to very much anger a group of people. It feels like, again, all that we can do is speculate. It feels like that is why they did it.
To me too. That's what I feel like as well. I feel like that is why they did it. I'm assuming there was either outrage or someone there who didn't agree with his politics. And this is coming from someone who's watched him for literally years and years at this point. He's never been that extreme. Like, he was a never Trumper and railed on Trump constantly during the Trump election. Like, he was a anti-Trumper as much as you could be. He's pro-abortion. He's pro-weed. He's pro same-sex marriage. He's not
more libertarian,
very libertarian.
And that's okay. Like, that's okay. It's a loaded topic because on the surface it's just this one specific instance, but there's so many implications that tie into what's going on in our current social and political climate. Were they canceled before or after the shootings?
That's a very good question. I actually don't remember.
Not that there's any true relationship between those two things.
That's a very good question. Let me see. Because I remember I even tweeted something about it, so I could tell you the date.
But if they thought that by eliminating dissenting voices or by pooling a certain group of people who they may consider their politics to be problematic, maybe they just didn't want any any sort of scene. I'm having a hard time articulating this. You know what I'm saying, though?
No, I know exactly. Excuse me. I know exactly what you're saying. You're saying after that, and this is a guy who has, like I said, had death threats to him and everything. It could be something that that they were like, hey, with all the political climate, that is another thing.
This could be inflammatory, so let's just nip it in the bud
to
prevent
July
violence
31st.
on either side. So July 31st was way before.
July 30th, yeah, way before.
So then that is all out the window. It doesn't even matter. Okay, so we're back to the thing of, did they fear that Colin would use this platform and use this streaming to the millions of Twitch viewers live right there at the time, or hundreds of thousands, however many there would be, that he would use it as an opportunity to grandstand or use it as a chance to do something political, say something political, challenge the conventional ideas. I mean,
My thing is, I like as someone who listens to. I don't know if you got a chance to listen to the one where he kind of talked about it real
I
quick
did
that
this
I
morning.
sent. That is like the most political his show has ever been. Like literally,
And
sake
it
and
was
simple.
about 20 minutes out of a over hour and a half
Yeah, and
podcast.
it was only because they brought it up, and then even the El Paso thing. I mean, you heard him. Did you hear him talk about that?
Yep.
It wasn't super right wing. Would you agree? His talking point?
Not at all. No,
Not at all.
I consider what he said to be pretty objectively separate from politics. He basically said that the El Paso shooting was inspired by racist rhetoric and that it's a big problem. And that I don't think is a political slant
I
on
would
either
agree.
side. I think if you're a Republican and you can't see that, then there's more going on than
I agree.
I think an objective person would have seen it in the same way that Colin and his partner, what's his partner's name?
Chris Reagan.
Yeah. The two of them seem to be very, accurate. They were on the right page as far as I'm concerned, as far as that goes.
And that's how most of their things are. If they do bring it up, they're pretty measured about things. The only thing I could think of is they do. It started with a fan bit because the podcast goes up on Tuesdays. They said they're here to make Tuesdays great again.
Yeah, I didn't like that.
That was like a joke, you know, because it started with a fan said, like, I sent it in an email. It was like making Tuesdays great again as a joke, and they like laughed about it, and then it just kind of stuck.
Yeah.
You know, but if that's the worst thing, like, you know, that's pretty mild in my opinion.
Yeah. It's
You know,
it's nothing that like we haven't made jokes. They
Way
haven't
worse
done
than that.
anything that we correct.
Yeah.
Do you, man, it's like it. There does feel to be, and this is more to the broader conversation. There does feel to be a lot of victimhood, playing the victim card on whenever it conveniences us. Like I have a problem with the idea that like you and I have talked about deplatforming, and we can think of specific examples and how it could potentially lead to something dangerous. But like with as far as like the Alex Joneses of the world and shit, it's like good riddance. If I'm being honest, I couldn't really give a fuck that a voice like that isn't given the access to go out and spew hateful rhetoric. 8chan getting shut down, fucking good riddance.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, so while there is a fear of censorship and what the implications could be further on down the line, a lot of times I'm just like, fuck most of these people that are getting deplatformed in the first place. But I do feel like this idea that like conservatives getting milkshakes dumped on them is an act of violence. Like I understand that if we're talking about it in terms of like
legal.
yeah,
It is
legally
assault.
that it's assault. I just don't feel like, to me, that's not the kind of violence that people need to be worried about.
No, but I personally feel we should worry about all violence, you know, and even though that's don't touch people, don't fight people you disagree with, I don't care what the ideology is, don't throw shit at people.
No,
you know, use your
100%.
words. That's just kind of where I fall.
Be decent, and I guess it's unfair for me to say that, but what I did kind of glean out of being a large content creator, being an influencer, I'd imagine does give you a little bit of an ego, does give you a little bit of an entitlement. I'd imagine it would do it to everyone. It's a very human thing, but I feel like to say I'm not welcome here and our fans aren't welcome here is a little bit inflammatory because nobody said that their fans weren't welcome there.
No, but I mean, they've been attacking. If you look at any of the articles written, they talk about his audience a lot, about how horrible his audience is.
Is that invalid?
I would say extremely invalid. If you look at any comments, they are, everyone's there. Liberal, conservative, atheist, Christian. I've never seen anyone, I've seen people attack people who attack him, like people who send death threats to him. You know, I've seen people like say shit back to them. You know, so I have seen that. But personally, and this is just personal, so it's all anecdotal, I haven't seen anything in his community that is extreme by any stretch of the imagination. You know, like I just haven't. I don't see any implication of that. I feel like the majority of people who listen to him are kind of like you and me, or even most people are just apolitical because they don't talk about it. Literally, all they talk about is PlayStation every week.
Um, do you think, and you and I are definitely people who have done this before. Do you think that saying incendiary things about SJWs, about social justice warriors, about people who are essentially anti-racism and anti-discrimination, do you think that there's anything really good that can come from that?
Yes, I think parody and absurdity is very good. I think if we make fun of bad behavior, because I would say a lot of SJWs, there are the ones who are literally just anti-racism. There are the other people who are outrage culture SJWs. And mocking is one of the greatest things. I think there's certain things in our culture we should mock. We should mock white supremacy. It's stupid. It's dumb. Make a joke out of it. Make it seem as so fucking ridiculous that why would anyone think this way? So I do think mockery is a good way of silencing. It's kind of the good way of moving our culture in a direction without government censorship.
So I agree I agree with what you said. I also I wonder is there a what is the relationship? What is the equivalency between a white supremacist and SJW? Like, where is the
White supremacy is obviously worse. Obviously, you know, I would say for me the SJW, what the part we need to stamp out is the censorship people, the people who say you can't do this, you can't do this, the people who throw milkshakes at people, the people who do that. We should also stamp that out. I think two things can be true at once. Absolutely, unequivocally, is white supremacy worse than SJW? Yeah, you know, obviously. I'm not going to say they're the two sides of the same coin because I don't think they are. But I do think I was just using that as an example of something that, like, we use mockery to get rid of homophobic people or to get rid of anything. You know what I mean? Anything we disagree with, of like, we mock people all the time. We mock rednecks with guns constantly.
Mm-hmm.
So we can't mock a SJW with purple hair. Why not?
Yeah, I don't disagree. I think it's an interesting thing, and I just feel like, and you've said it before, I've said it before, people will hear and take what they want to, and you can say something in jest, correct. You can say something in jest and not mean anything by it, but there's going to be that one person out of a million that takes it 100% literally and doesn't understand the nuance of sarcasm or you know, the nonverbal things where you don't say, I said this thing, but I did not mean it 100% literally. So that's where I start to that's where I have a bit of conflict as far as all of political rhetoric and everything goes. And I don't know what I would like the solution to be. I don't know that there is a solution, but it's like, yeah, on one hand, we don't want to deplatform people, and in no way am I saying that Colin Moriarty is one of the people that is perpetuating, hateful rhetoric. I'm not familiar enough with his stuff. From what I did hear, he doesn't seem that kind of person at all. But I am anti-censorship. But then at the same time, I'm also like anti crazy people acting on the ideology of people who may or may not are they feeding their own ego? Is it all about like, I have a million people that listen to my voice, these people did something that disrespected me, so now I'm going to use my platform to embolden these million people to stand against this thing that took a stance against me?
Yeah, but I mean, I think he's taking one step farther. I mean, he's refunding out of his own pocket the $150 to people who bought tickets to come see him.
For 20 people.
Yeah, but I mean, he's not that big of a YouTuber.
Right.
Like, I mean, he's the number one. He's sold all his shares. I'm sure he's doing fine. You know what I mean? But if you look at his views, they're not crazy. You know, they're 20,000 views, 100,000 on a good video, you know? Like, they're not doing that. I do think, and this is me coming from someone who's listened to him for years, and I don't know the guy, obviously. He comes off as a very genuine, principled man, you know, and I do think he feels like, well, because even at the clip I sent you, he's like, they've taken shots at my audience numerous
Mm-hmm.
times. And he's like, I don't like that either, you know? And my thing is, there is a line I do think that if you cross it, deplatforming is good, you know? Like, I just worry that we keep moving that line more and more and more.
This
Uh,
wasn't the place to do it. No question about it. As far as I'm concerned, I, again, opening it up to a broader conversation, but specifically in this instance, this was not the right way for them to go about it.
No, like my thing is, it's a PlayStation podcast.
Mm-hmm.
It's no more political than any other IG. Actually, I'd say it's less than a lot of the IGN stuff that you read because IGN takes a left stance on a lot of issues. And this is coming from a guy who's a huge IGN fan. When they bring in politics, guess what? If I don't agree with that, I'm like, okay, whatever. I'm here to talk about video games.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It's not that big of a deal. And maybe I've seen comments where people are like, hey, Collins made me a little more conservative because they come in and listen to PlayStation and then they hear another side. And I actually think that's not necessarily making conservative, but I think it's healthy to go in and listen to people on a subject that is neutral. And then if politics come up, you might be exposed to an idea that you weren't aware of or you even disagree with, but that's fine. And I feel like the bar between like a what's his Richard Spencer was like someone who that's the white supremacist, right?
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, deplatforming, fuck him, piece of shit. Then we move the bar down to Alex Jones, which is crazy person, says some crazy thing. I would put him no more extreme than Rachel Maddow. I think they're both conspiracy theorist nut jobs, but we moved to that line. Now we're moving it down to a PlayStation podcast. That's my worry, is there is a line, but it seems to me the line of acceptable speech keeps getting, I wouldn't say lowered, I would say more left is probably a more accurate way of doing that. I feel like, it's, we're getting to a point where you can, if you think a pro gay marriage, pro weed, pro-abortion atheist is alt-right, and then another guy who believes in universal basic income and was a Bernie guy, like
Yeah.
like those aren't right wingers. They're just not. They're a libertarian and a liberal guy. Like, and that being said, if they were right wingers, who cares?
Same. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And PAX didn't have to grant them the panel in the first
Yes.
place. If they would have just said no, there would not have been a conversation. Like they can deny you for any number of reasons. So the issue isn't that they didn't give them the panel, it's that they walked it back, is that they said, okay, yeah, no problem, feel free to promote it, and then all of a sudden, oh, actually we've decided that we're not going to allow you to do that. On one hand, it's like if I were to go out and say something derogatory about Colin Moriarty's fan base on Twitter, would that allow him to say tomorrow they take shots at our fan base, as in implying like the institution or PAX or some entity is taking shots at his fan base as opposed to just some person that took shots at his fan base?
I don't think for him it's the individuals. I think it's more gaming websites that have wrote about his fan base. That I think he has an issue with is gaming websites have written articles before and like I don't want to say the exact ones, but I think Kotaku wrote a couple.
Yeah, I saw that.
Yeah, like I've seen it before where they've called anyone who listens to him a white supremacist, and you're just like, what? They listen to him for PlayStation. Take his politics completely out of it.
So, how could this be justified? Like, what would the set of circumstances be to where they made the right decision? What if they got some fucking calls behind the scenes that were like, if if hidden or sacred symbol shows up, we're going to come in there and fucking do something horrible. And if you release this information, then we're going to do something horrible at your event. Maybe their hands are tied. I mean, right?
I think that's a possibility. I think it's highly unlikely.
It's ludicrous. I mean, that would be like the
Yeah.
1% chance that something like that would happen, but maybe there is a justifiable reason why.
Well, my thing is too, and I agree with you as far as if they had just denied them outright, we're like, no, we don't want you here. Fine, whatever. It's a private company. It's they're allowed to do what they want. This guy has years of content, even a couple of years of sacred symbols. They know what the podcast is about. I'm sure they do. If you're in the gaming community and to that level, you know what sacred symbols is. It's literally the number one PlayStation podcast. I don't see how you can be completely unaware of who these two men are. And I, had they done that, that's fine. Or even if had something came up and they're like, wow, I didn't realize Colin said this, and then they release that would be even not fine. I think it would be ridiculous because I don't think, as far as I know, as someone who's listening to him, I've never heard him say anything very extreme at all.
That tweet was the most innocuous, haha, fucking any comedian could have made that joke and it not been a problem at all. And considering their brand was kind of funny, the fact that he got ostracized from that company, there must have been things going on behind the scenes, because that was the most innocuous, like innocent joke. And if his wife or girlfriend or whatever was not offended by it, who gives a fuck what a bunch of just dudes, chicks on the internet think about it,
I think I agree. There must have been more to the story, and that it seems like both Greg Miller and Colin, who were the heads of Kind of Funny. I mean, they all four of them were, but let's be real. Like, they were the ones who really pushed the envelope. They were the reasons you tuned in for Greg Miller or Colin, and then the other guys were like the supporting cast, but I agree. There must have been more that we won't know, that happened with it. And I agree. I think he even called it, he goes, that's no more extreme than anything you would hear on like Married with Children.
Right. Yeah.
Like, it was like a dumb dad joke. And he's like, for me to almost have to literally have my entire company pulled out for me over a dad joke. Like, are you kidding me?
And I can see how that would give you a chip on your shoulder. And I can also see how it would push you towards being more quick to ridicule SJWs in particular. I just wonder sometimes is singling out, and I see the irony and I see how silly it comes off, but singling out people who essentially what they're trying to do, even if some people go about it the wrong way, I think what they're trying to do is commendable.
Yeah, but I agree. I think what the motivations are as well. But I think a lot of sometimes these religious right people who are super extreme, their motivation is good, but their tactics are horrible.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like that's more an apt comparison than the white supremacist one, it's kind of like SJWs do a thing with language. The left has done pretty good at this in general, where they'll do a thing with language where they're like, how can you be against us? We're for social justice. Isn't social justice good? How can you be against Antifa? We're literally anti-fascist. And you're like, well, everyone hates fascism. They do this thing with names where it's really good marketing, essentially, and yes, on a surface level, is social justice good? Yeah, I think everyone would agree we want more justice. Justice is a great word. But just because you slap a word on something and your tactics can be extreme, not all are, I think. But the thing is, I feel like there's a difference between a liberal and a social justice warrior. I feel like most people are able to make that distinction. Most liberals want social justice without being social justice warriors.
Yeah, I agree. And the whole Antifa thing, I've thought about that as well. Is like exactly in the terms that you said it. Is like, yeah, fuck fascism, and that's kind of the thing of like, it's hard on one hand to compare the alt-right to Antifa, because what Antifa stands for, regardless of what people do with it, what it stands for is anti-fascism. It was really big in the late 70s, but then when I got the most familiar with it was in the punk rock scene in the 1990s, when a lot of there were really two different kinds of punk rocks. There were a lot of skinhead punk rockers, and then there were like the anti-fascist people. And yes, they would show up to punk rock shows, the straight edgers. They would show up to punk rock shows and beat the fuck out of Nazis or the skinheads, you know. And it was definitely of a movement that didn't shy away from violence, but maybe a violence that a lot of people could be more on board with. I mean, look at Indiana Jones movies. Like, Nazis are the bad guys. There's no other side where it's like, well, but Hitler made some pretty good points. It's like, no, fascism sucks. Fascism's not an awesome thing. But I do also understand the difference between what fighting for equality is versus that term social justice warrior, because we all play word games a little bit, and social justice warrior has taken on a negative context when
I would agree.
I think fundamentally what it was supposed to be isn't a bad thing. So
I agree there. I think the fundamentals behind it, social justice is a good thing. Social justice warrior is a negative connotation for someone who either is two things. One, a crybaby is a big thing that we make fun of. The other is people who actually use fascist policies to shut down language and call all white men evil and use their own form of social inequality to justify. They use the term social justice to do essentially like either reverse racism or, which I hate the term reverse racism. It's just racism. But to disparage other groups under a guise of the term social justice.
I
feel
understand.
like that's what people rail against, not social justice itself. I would assume the vast majority of people are pro social justice. There is a minority out there that is absolutely not, but I would assume the vast majority of people agree with social justice. We want more equality.
I think just on a micro, a way that I can look at social justice warriors as doing something negative or doing something detrimental to almost antithetical to what it is that we are supposed to stand for, like the Batwoman trailer. I know this is a dumb thing. I know people on the far right have had a field day hating this trailer, and I watched it, and it bothered me. It made me cringe when she says, the suit's almost perfect once it's fit for a woman. Okay, so now we're diminishing one group to build up another that has historically been persecuted. I understand we're not all on equal footing, but if the idea is to make women better than men, that's not equality. That's not fucking equality. That's kind of back to what you were saying about using the guise of social justice to push agenda and to vilify. And I understand the power is going to have to be taken. I understand that it's going to have to be, because we are a patriarchal society. It has been that way forever. But if the goal is equality, then the idea that women are better than men or men are better than women that's flawed thinking. That's the problem in the first place.
There's this cartoon, I don't know exactly what it says, but it's something like there's a person who's short standing behind a fence trying to watch something, a person who's tall, and someone, like, I'm paraphrasing, someone says like social equality, and they put a box underneath the person, you know, to make them equal so they can both see over. And then the other one says social justice, and the other dude has his legs sawed off so neither of them can see over the thing.
That's interesting.
And I feel you kind of hit the nail on the head. So you can be pro two things at once. I don't know why this is such a concept that people cannot wrap their brains around. I'm very pro woman. Guess what? I'm still pro man because I'm pro human. You know, you can be, I'm pro black. I'm also pro white. You know, those two things are not in conflict against one another unless you make them a conflict against one another. And I feel like that's kind of where we're at with our society. I know we've gone on a little bit of a tangent to a larger discussion, but we're in our society where instead of building people up, like, you know, I won't even bring it, but there was a comment made by a politician about racism and profiling, and they were like, about profiling Muslim people. And my response is, stop fucking profiling Muslim people. It's ridiculous. Yeah. Her response was, no, profile white people. What? Like, how is that the answer? Is like, how about we stop the bad behavior, not add equal bad behavior to the other side.
Right.
And I feel like that's just a weird way of thinking. And I get it. I feel like all these people who have been marginalized, I understand the hate, the anger, the chip on your shoulder. Like I get it, I definitely do. Like with black people, this country has treated black people horribly. I don't know how anyone can look like when I meet people on the ride who straight face looking like, oh, black people have been fine through our entire country. I'm like, come on, you're just willfully ignoring all of history, So I get it. I just don't think if you're treating a group bad, the proper response is to stop treating the group bad, not to treat the other group equally as bad.
Right. Yeah, and that the cartoon illustration kind of it expresses that point, I think, in a very valid way. And yeah, I think we both see eye to eye. Pretty much most of what we talk about.
Yeah.
I don't think there's a lot of dissent here. My question for you, I want to pause it before we move on to the next thing. Is this a net positive or a negative for hidden figures or what is it, sacred symbols?
This is anytime you deplatform, it's a positive for every single one of these people. Their Patreons go up, their support goes up, their brand awareness goes up. There's people who've never heard of sacred symbols listening to this podcast right now. It's always a net positive.
I heard it for my first time as a byproduct of it, and I enjoyed what I heard. So there you go. Yeah, it definitely got more eyes on it.